It was a quiet evening, just like any other. The kind of evening where you can hear the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant sound of traffic on the road, and the occasional creak of the house settling. It was peaceful, comfortable, safe. Our had just finished a long day at work, the kind where you're mentally exhausted but physically fine. As I walked through the door of my small apartment, I felt the familiar sense of relief. My shoes clacked softly on the hardwood floor as I tossed my bag on the couch and made my way into the kitchen. The smell of leftover pizza still lingered in the air, a reminder of my dinner the night before. I slipped into my couch, staring at the bathroom. Pizza was my comfort food, something I could rely on after a stressful day. Tonight, I had ordered a fresh one. The cheesy goodness, the crispy crust. It was always a little indulgent, but it was what I craved. I grabbed the pizza box from the counter, my stomach growling in anticipation. The box was still warm, just like I liked it. As I opened it, the steam escaped in a soft cloud, and the aroma hit me instantly. There it was, the perfect pizza, topped with all the right ingredients. But as I reached for a slice, something strange caught my eye. There, nestled in the corner of the box, was something that shouldn't have been there. A small, odd-looking smear of what looked like cheese. It was out of place, like a fingerprint on a clean surface. It didn't belong. I paused, my hand hovering over the pizza. It wasn't that the cheese itself looked strange. No. It was the way it was shaped. It was almost like it had been deliberately placed. A perfect, symmetrical swirl. I felt a strange unease in the pit of my stomach. Shaking it off, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe it was just a mistake during the making of the pizza. Maybe it was a little extra cheese left over from a previous slice. I had no idea, but I wasn't going to let it ruin my meal. I reached for a slice, pulled it out, and took a bite. The taste was just as I expected. Delicious. The cheese, the sauce, the toppings, all blending together in perfect harmony. But then, halfway through the slice, something unexpected happened. A chill ran down my spine. I could have sworn I heard a faint sound. A small, high-pitched squeak, almost like the sound of someone whispering. I stopped chewing, my eyes darting around the room. The house was still, silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I brushed it off as my imagination playing tricks on me. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I was just too focused on the weird smear of cheese. But then it happened again. A faint squeak. A soft sound that seemed to come from the direction of the pizza box. My heart skipped a beat. I set the slice down and stared at the pizza. My eyes narrowed, scanning the surface. I could see the smear of cheese again, but it looked different now. It wasn't just a smear. It was pulsing, gently, almost imperceptibly, as though it was alive. I took a step back, my breath catching in my throat. The room suddenly felt colder, as if the warmth had been sucked out of the air. My mind raced. What was happening? Was this some kind of prank? Or was it something else? I stared at the cheese, unable to tear my gaze away. The pulsing seemed to grow more pronounced, more rhythmic, like a heartbeat. My skin tingled, and my pulse quickened. There was something wrong with this pizza, something wrong with the cheese. I slowly backed away, my feet almost dragging across the floor. My fingers brushed against the edge of the counter as I reached for my phone, my hands trembling. I was about to call the pizza place to ask them what was going on when I heard the sound again. A whisper, not from the pizza box, but from somewhere deeper. It was soft, but distinct, and it sent a wave of dread through me. I dropped the phone. Stood frozen, staring at the pizza box, the whispering sound lingering in the air like a faint echo. My breath was shallow, every nerve on edge, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop even further. The soft squeaks, like whispers, had stopped, but the eerie feeling had only grown stronger. It was as though something unseen was in the room with me, watching. 3-4 months later, I slowly turned my head, scanning the dimly lit apartment. The flickering of the overhead light cast long shadows on the walls, making every corner appear darker than usual. My eyes darted from the door to the window, the kitchen sink, the refrigerator. Everything seemed normal. But it didn't feel normal. There was a presence here now, something I couldn't explain. The whispering came again, but this time it was clearer. Almost like words, but distorted. The sound seemed to come from all around me, as if the very walls were speaking. I clenched my fists, trying to steady my shaking hands. My mind raced. Was I imagining this? Had the stress of the past few weeks finally caught up with me? I didn't know what to think anymore. The pizza box in front of me suddenly felt like a barrier between me and whatever was lurking just beyond my sight. I reached out, hesitating for a moment before I slowly lifted the lid. The pulsating smear of cheese was still there, but now it looked different. It had spread across the pizza in a delicate spiral, almost like a pattern. It didn't make sense. How could cheese do that? How could it move on its own? I leaned closer, my eyes narrowing as I studied the strange swirl. The whispering grew louder, more frantic. I could almost make out the words, but they didn't sound like any language I knew. It was a jumble of syllables, a language too foreign to comprehend. But one word seemed to repeat itself over and over. Hungry. The air felt thick, heavy, like the room was closing in around me. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of here. But something held me in place. Some force, some unspoken compulsion, kept me rooted to the spot. I could feel my pulse in my temples, the fear slowly creeping up my spine. My eyes flicked back to the pizza box, and that's when I saw it. A small movement. A shift. The cheese. It was alive. The swirl had started to crawl toward the edge of the pizza, moving in a way that defied all logic. It stretched out, reaching for the crust as though it were searching for something. My breath caught in my throat, and I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the kitchen chair behind me. I should have left then. I should have grabbed my coat and bolted out the door. But I couldn't. My legs felt heavy, as though they were made of stone. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the pizza, from the cheese, from whatever it was that was happening. The whispers intensified, now almost deafening, but still indecipherable. I felt like I was being pulled into the sound, as though it was seeping into my very soul. The word, hungry, echoed in my mind, reverberating with an unsettling clarity. Suddenly the cheese shot forward with terrifying speed, latching onto the slice closest to the edge of the box. The pizza seemed to tremble, the crust rising slightly, as though something beneath it was pushing upward. The sight was too much. I couldn't comprehend it. In that moment, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I turned and bolted for the door, not daring to look back. My mind screamed for me to escape, to run as far away as possible, but my feet felt like they were stuck in mud. My heart was racing, and every instinct in me screamed that something terrible was about to happen. As I reached for the door handle, I heard it again, the whispering, the word that haunted me. Hungry. I froze. It wasn't just a whisper anymore. It was a voice that was unmistakably close. Behind me. I didn't dare turn around. My hand was still gripping the door handle, knuckles white, heart hammering in my chest. The voice. No, the whisper. The voice was so close now, it felt like it was in my ear. Cold breath grazed my neck, sending chill through my entire body. Hungry, it repeated, its tone deeper now, more distinct. It was a low growl, like a hunger that couldn't be satisfied, something primal and terrifying. The word slithered into my mind, wrapping itself around my thoughts. I snapped my head forward, desperate to focus on the door, to get out. But the air in the room was thick, suffocating. I could feel the weight of whatever was behind me, pressing in. My mind screamed for me to move, but my body was frozen. It was as if some unseen force had wrapped its fingers around my spine, holding me in place. San sat. The whisper came again, this time with a sound that wasn't just a voice. It was something more, a slithering, like the scraping of claws against the floor. It was moving toward me. My eyes flicked to the corner of the room. The shadows seemed to stretch, as if they were reaching for me, pulling me into their depths. I could feel the temperature drop even further, a cold that went beyond the physical, sinking deep into my bones. It was as though the room itself was alive, breathing in time with my own shallow breaths. I needed to leave, now. But the moment I tried to pull away from the door, the voice, no, the growl, spoke again, this time in a guttural tone that sent waves of terror crashing through me. Don't leave. Yet. The words were unmistakable. It wasn't just hunger anymore. It was a command. And I couldn't ignore it. Still, I didn't ignore it. I stumbled backward, my legs giving way beneath me. My hands scrambled to find something to hold on to, but there was nothing. The kitchen table, the counter, the walls. They were all too far away. My eyes locked on the pizza box, still sitting on the table, the slice of pizza now completely surrounded by that strange, pulsating cheese. Screamed and I saw it. The cheese had begun to move again, but this time it wasn't just stretching. It was crawling, slowly creeping across the pizza, inch by inch, as though it were alive. It reached the edge of the box, and I watched, horrified, as it spilled over, pooling onto the table in thick, writhing masses. It was like a living thing, twisting and contorting in unnatural ways. The voice behind me spoke once more, the words heavy with menace. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't understand what was happening. This wasn't possible. None of this made sense. The pizza, the cheese. It was like something out of a nightmare, something I couldn't escape from. I turned, finally, my eyes locking onto the open door, my escape. But before I could make a move, something stopped me. A presence. Something intangible, yet so real it made the air crackle with energy. I heard the scraping sound again, but this time it wasn't just behind me. It was all around me. The floorboards creaked underfoot, and the walls seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. The room was alive, vibrating with the strange energy that now surrounded me. I backed away from the door, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. My legs felt like they were made of lead, and I couldn't bring myself to look at the pizza anymore. The sight of it, the smell, the sounds, it was too much. And then, from the darkness, I saw something moving. A figure. A shape that wasn't quite human, yet not entirely alien either. It was shifting, like a shadow that had come to life. It was tall, impossibly tall, and its form seemed to distort with every blink. One moment it was standing by the table, and the next it was halfway across the room. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My throat was tight, as though something was pressing down on it. My hands gripped my sides, nails digging into my skin as I tried to hold myself together. The figure stepped closer, and with each movement, the air grew colder. The growl, that insistent, gnawing growl, filled my mind again. It wasn't just the voice now. It was everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, the floor. They were all pulsing with it. The figure spoke, its voice like gravel being scraped across metal. "Join me." I stumbled back, my mind spinning. The figure was right in front of me now, its shadowy form towering over me, its presence suffocating. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. And then, with a sickening finality, the voice spoke one last time, "Eat or die." The air felt thicker now, almost like I was breathing through a heavy, damp cloth. My chest tightened, my heart racing so fast I thought it might burst. I could feel the presence of the figure looming over me, its shadow swallowing the space around me. The whisper growl came again, vibrating in my skull like a command, insistent and unyielding. Eat or die slowly took over my mind. I was paralyzed. The voice seemed to invade every corner of my mind, suffocating me with its demand. My eyes were glued to the pizza, the mass of writhing cheese that now looked like a grotesque, living thing. I could almost hear it, the way it stretched and slithered across the table, curling and twisting like it was feeding on the very air itself. The figure, the thing that had somehow come into my house, was still standing there, towering above me, its shadow swallowing the room. I could barely make out its features. Just a silhouette, shifting and flickering like a shadow cast by a fire. But the eyes burned through me. I felt them, two dark orbs glowing faintly with a sickly light. They weren't just watching me, they were inside me, digging into my thoughts, feeding on my fear. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think. The room was closing in on me, the walls pressing tighter and tighter with each passing second. The growl came again, more insistent this time, its deep, guttural tone rattling my bones. Eat or die. I could feel the choice before me, hanging in the air like a heavy, suffocating fog. The pizza, no, the thing on the table, was not just food anymore. It was a symbol, a choice, a curse. If I ate it, I would be giving in to whatever dark force had claimed my kitchen, my house, my life. If I didn't, I feared the consequences would be far worse than anything I could imagine. The figure moved again, its presence shifting closer, closer still, until it was right in front of me. The air was so cold now I could see my breath, misting in front of my face. My skin felt like it was crawling, every hair standing on end, as though the figure's very presence was enough to make my body react in fear. It spoke again, its voice low and cruel, like a hiss through clenched teeth. "You will eat. It's your only choice." My legs shook beneath me, but I forced myself to step backward, my eyes never leaving the table, never leaving the pizza. It seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat, each beat of terror drawing me closer, drawing me in. But I couldn't bring myself to touch it. "Why me?" I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible, lost in the cold and the darkness. "Why me? Why this?" The figure's head tilted slightly, the movement almost fluid, unnatural. The dark orbs that were its eyes flickered, like they were considering my question, toying with the answer. "Because you are weak," it said, its voice echoing in the room like a deep, rumbling growl. "You are like all the others, hungry for something more than you can understand." It raised its hands to support its words, its palms opening up and revealing small hands. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Weak. Hungry. I had been chasing something, hadn't I? Chasing the thrill of something new, something exciting, something to fill the emptiness inside. But now I was here, standing in a kitchen, with a choice that felt like it would tear me apart. The growl returned, more urgent now, more desperate. I felt the force of its command press down on me, squeezing the air from my lungs. My hand, without my consent, reached out, trembling, toward the pizza. I could feel the cold cheese now, the sticky, slick texture under my fingertips. The sensation was wrong. It wasn't just food. It wasn't just cheese. It was something else. Something dark, something that wasn't supposed to be here. But I couldn't stop myself. My hand moved on its own, as though it had a mind of its own, pulling me toward the pizza. I could feel the pressure in my chest, the weight of the figure's presence, urging me forward. The room spun, and for a moment I thought I might faint. I was inches from it now. The smell, the stench of something rotten filled my nose. I wanted to pull back, to run, to scream, but my body wouldn't listen. It was like I was trapped in a dream, unable to control my actions, unable to wake up. And then, just as my fingers brushed against the edge of the pizza, the door slammed open behind me with a deafening bang. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. The figure was gone. I whipped around, expecting to see whatever nightmare had been chasing me, but there was nothing. The room was still. The shadows, the growling, the pressure, all of it was gone. I stumbled back, my hand still hovering over the pizza, unsure of what to do next. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had I imagined it? Was it a trick of the mind? A hallucination? I didn't know. But the door was wide open now, and I knew one thing for sure. I had to leave. I had to get out of this place before whatever had been haunting me found a way to pull me back. I turned and ran. My feet pounded against the floor, each step echoing through the empty house like a drumbeat. The door to the outside world stood wide open, a beacon of freedom in the distance. I could almost taste the fresh air, feel the cool night breeze brushing against my skin. But the terror that clung to me like a shadow made it impossible to feel safe. Every step I took felt like I was being pulled back, like invisible hands were reaching for me from behind, dragging me toward the darkness. I couldn't look back. I knew if I did, I'd see something I couldn't explain, something that would break me. But the weight of the house, its oppressive silence, was unbearable. It felt as if the walls themselves were watching me, waiting for me to make the wrong move. I stumbled out the door and into the yard, gasping for breath. The night air was sharp, colder than it should have been, biting at my skin like the teeth of some unseen beast. I took a few steps away from the house, but something in the back of my mind told me that no matter how far I went, I couldn't outrun this. I couldn't escape. The yard was empty, silent. The trees that lined the edges of the property were like dark sentinels, their branches swaying in the wind, casting long, twisting shadows that seemed to reach for me. I glanced around, my heart still pounding in my chest, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I should have kept running. I should have left everything behind, gotten in my car and driven as far away as I could. But something inside me, something dark, pulled me back toward the house, toward the kitchen. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to face whatever I had just encountered. But the urge was too strong. It was like a force outside of myself, compelling me to return. I tried to shake it off, to convince myself that I was just imagining things, that everything would be okay if I just left, but my feet wouldn't stop moving. They carried me back toward the house, toward the kitchen, toward that damned pizza. When I stepped back inside, the house felt different. The air was heavier, the silence thicker. It was as if time itself had stopped, holding its breath. The kitchen was exactly the same as I had left it, except for one thing. The pizza was gone. My stomach dropped, a cold, empty feeling spreading through me. I had seen it, hadn't I? I had touched it. I had been right there, about to eat it. And now it was just gone. There were no crumbs, no evidence of it ever being there at all. It was as if the whole thing had been an illusion, a nightmare. And now I was standing in the aftermath. The nightmare had served as means to draw me into the vortex. A nightmare. And now I was standing there at exactly the right moment. But I knew it hadn't been a dream. I had felt the weight of it. I had smelled it. I had almost touched it. And the figure, it had been real. I could still feel the pressure of its gaze, its command. The chill in the air was still there, clinging to me like a shroud. I took a step back, my heart hammering in my chest. The door was still open, the outside world still waiting, but I couldn't leave. Not now. Not after what had happened. I had to understand. I had to know what the hell was going on. The sound of something scraping against the floor broke the silence. My eyes snapped to the counter where the pizza box had been just moments before. There was something there now. A shadow. A figure standing at the edge of the counter, its shape shifting and undulating like liquid darkness. I spotted the figure. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to see it, but I had no choice. My feet were frozen to the floor, my body unable to look away. The figure moved closer, its shape becoming more defined. I could see it now. The form of a person, tall and thin, draped in darkness. Its face was obscured, but I could feel its eyes, burning into me, probing me, reading me like an open book. It opened its mouth, and the growl came again, deep and rumbling, shaking the very foundation of the house. You cannot run from this. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run, but I was trapped. The figure was here, and it wasn't going anywhere. It was the embodiment of everything I had feared, everything I had tried to escape. "You are mine," the figure said, its voice colder than ice. "You always have been." The words echoed in my mind, sending a shockwave of dread through me. What did it mean? I had never seen this thing before. I had never done anything to deserve this. But the way it spoke, the way it looked at me, it knew me. It knew everything about me. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I didn't dare let them fall. I had to stay strong. I had to find a way out. But before I could think of anything, the figure stepped forward, its movements so fluid, so unnatural, that it sent a chill down my spine. It reached out a hand, its fingers elongated and sharp like claws, and for the first time, I realized just how much it was in control. "You made the wrong choice," it whispered, and then everything went black. I woke up in the kitchen, my body aching as though I had been hit by a truck. My eyes fluttered open, but everything was dark, the only light coming from the flickering bulb above the counter. My head throbbed, and the metallic taste of fear lingered on my tongue. The cold was gone, but the feeling of dread remained, hanging thick in the air. For a moment I thought it had all been a dream. Maybe I had imagined it all. The figure, the pizza, the growl. But as I slowly sat up, I realized something. The kitchen was the same as before. The pizza box, the counter, the empty space where the figure had stood. It was all just as I had left it, except for one thing. There was a single slice of pizza on the counter, sitting in the same spot where the box had been earlier. It looked normal, No sinister glow, no strange presence. Just a simple slice of pizza, as though nothing had happened. I reached for it without thinking, my fingers trembling as I picked it up. The cheese was still warm, the crust perfectly crisp. It was as if the house had reset, as if everything had gone back to normal. But I knew better. This wasn't normal. This wasn't over. As I lifted the slice to my mouth, a wave of nausea hit me, a sickening sensation that made my stomach churn. I couldn't do it. I couldn't eat it. The memory of the figure, the feeling of being watched, the growl that had haunted me, it all came rushing back. I knew I couldn't escape it. No matter how far I ran, no matter how much I tried to forget, it would always be here. It would always find me. I put the slice back down, my hands shaking. There was no point in pretending anymore. The house, the pizza, the figure. It was all part of something bigger, something I couldn't escape. The growl returned, low and menacing, vibrating through the walls of the kitchen. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt the chill of its presence, even though the room was warm. The figure stepped out of the shadows, its form emerging like smoke. It was here, in front of me, closer than ever. "You cannot run," it said again, its voice smooth and cold, like a blade cutting through my soul. "You are part of this. You always have been." I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, trapped in this nightmare that had no end. The figure's eyes burned into me, its gaze unrelenting. The last slice of pizza sat between us, a symbol of everything I had tried to escape. I knew now that it wasn't just a meal. It was a trap, a test, a choice I had made, whether I realized it or not. And as I stared at the figure, I understood. There was no escaping it. There was no running. I was already part of the story. I was already in the game. The figure reached out, its hand hovering over the pizza, and I saw the faintest flicker of something almost like a smile, on its shadowed face. "You made your choice," it whispered, "and now you will always be hungry." August saw it on the man's forehead and sighed.